Hi everybody, I'm Gergely from Vizcom and we're going to do a design with me type of series. So I'm just going to go ahead and design some objects with the help of Vizcom to give you some sort of insights on how would I, for example, implement Vizcom in my own creative process and how to take advantage of each feature. Hopefully this can be insightful in terms of how to utilize each feature in the application and how to build it into a workflow, for example. So let's jump in. The first object would be a sender device, maybe a drill as well, but something along the lines of a handheld sender that we're gonna do. So I'll just create a new file here. I usually start in the studio and I'm gonna give it a name of, let's make it Power Tools. And I start in the studio. I usually try to match the canvas to the actual object that I'm aiming to design to fit it nicely. So landscape could work with the handheld sender device. And we have to do a sketch here. So let's try to figure out the basic package. What I'll do is I trigger the symmetry, and I can also maybe move the symmetry a bit to the left side, because then I want to sketch out the main outline. I can also just right click, set a thinner brush, and I'm gonna just roughly put out the basic dimensions of the sender. So something like this we would need. Maybe we want to go, this will be just the rough outline of it. So we need this spherical rounded soft shape where somebody can hold on to it. And we can also have a handle at one side. Something like this. I'm going to just disable symmetry and delete this side. And yeah, let's make it a bit tighter. Okay, by the way, you can sketch straight lines by holding down Shift on the keyboard. This is very handy alongside the symmetry, of course, to make something that is a bit more accurate. And now I just need this handle part and the rest of the device. Okay, and this will be the cable part, and this will be the handle part. Now the intersection is a bit interesting here, but I think it can work. Like sucking onto that cylindrical shape a bit. Okay, something like this could work. Maybe we want to have here a contrast element or some sort of padding grip. Let's do a grip here, and I just sort of, instead of shading, it's better to color fill with Vizcom to actually get the contrast across. So what I'll do is, after the line sketch is can be a good input, but that can still be misinterpreted. Vizcom can read the contrast as well. So if you want to give it a bit more sense of shape and sense of contrast more so, I'm going to start blocking out some of the elements and apply a basic shading before that. Now I can do that by setting the brush tool to pretty soft to just basically give it a lighter shading. Okay, we can of course also do that with the other surfaces, but we don't need to be too detailed. What I want to put contrast on is, let's create a new layer and let's make the hardness back to 100. And I want to have contrast on this grip, also on the trigger, and on this cable part, and maybe on this bottom section. So I can just yet again hold down Shift for straight lines, lower opacity, and I can use the brush eraser tool to just correct these a bit. What I can also do is set back the opacity a bit and do here a surface, a lighter surface, if you want to further develop and just indicate the lights here. And I could also do that with the bottom parts as well. Maybe I'll do some basic color blocking there too. And maybe let's make this port red. By the way, I could also set these multiply, or I can put the sketch on top to let them shine through. And as I said, this is not that important to actually do the lighting scenario and some of the basic shape description with these. I just prefer to have an overall sketch that tells a bit more story from the product too, not necessarily just a line drawing. So I'm gonna start with something like this, and we can see that if we have an uploaded sketch or if we made a sketch with Vizcom, we also have a description. And I can always click on this describe. And if we sketched well, thankfully Vizcom could recognize that it's a side view of a handheld power sander with a metallic body, rectangular red sanding pad. I wouldn't do this rectangular, I would say this is a circular red sanding pad, but since this is a side view, it will not be necessary to call this out now. So what I'll do here is I can just make the first renderings essentially. I can either explore this on the workbench view, or I can also create maybe the first renderings here to validate the sketch. What I would do here, before jumping into render, we can also just refine on a sketch to see if we can get a little bit of value addition by refining. So if I go to refine, now it's going to keep the colors, and now I just have to lower on the influence. With this general V2, I have to lower it quite a bit to get a certain difference here, but let's see. Okay, that's clear that that if I don't finish the actual shading on some of the areas, then it's going to be considered as a negative space, perhaps. Ooh, but I like this more chiseled transition. Some of these can definitely work, but I wonder if I should actually fix the shading to have a nicer surface overall. Maybe what I'll do here is I'll just add another layer with multiply, and maybe I use this shade to just sort of fill. Maybe setting it something like this. And now if I go to refine, let's see what happens. Also here we have negative space since I didn't fill that part out, but that's not a problem, I think. We will render that part and that will be eliminated later on. Okay, these are quite cool in terms of the shape itself. So I might just add one of these. Maybe this one is quite cool, so I can just add. I can of course explore refining in other styles, such as the exterior V2. I enjoy this style, just exploring refinement in this even. Here I don't have to lower down on the influence that much. Something along the lines of 50% could work. Yeah, let's turn this thing into a spaceship. Okay. So we can get some nice volume inspirations here. That's a more chiseled surfacing, almost like looks almost like Asterix's hat. Okay. Okay, that's a cool one as well. Maybe I keep this one. I like it. And now what we can also do is if I go back to render, and now I can create the rendering going back to the more realistic style, the Vizcom General, and I can give it a go with the same prompt description, maybe leaving it a bit of freedom, like 70% to render it out. But we can notice that the refine kind of added quite a bit of artifacts to it already. So I might want to eliminate those in order not to compromise the render process. Now what we can also do, we have negative space here that we might want to fill out, but I can also lower down on the palette influence to have something which is a bit lighter. So I click on generate with 50% palette influence, meaning that it's going to be lighter and not necessarily create this strong image. So we can be a bit more considerate and still keep it something along the lines of a design sketch. Now this is a cool one. Yes, this will be the one. With the other ones, this big highlight became negative space that we don't want to have. And with this one, it's quite good. So we can go ahead, add these. Alternatively, I would also just use the magic erase on this layer, since it started adding details that might be useful, but now I just want to keep it clean. Sometimes if something is not loading, feel free to just Control R or Command R and to refresh the page. And then you can repeat the action after refreshing and it should work fine. So I just select this with Magic Eraser and it should eliminate that part. Let's try it another time to try to make it a bit more integral. Okay. And also this part. Now there could be some other details that we don't need now, like these elements. And at this point, I can also just simply create another rendering. Alternatively, I can also expose the sketch layer by alt-clicking and getting the background too. And I can basically have it, if I go out to the infinite canvas, as a base for exploring. So I'll just copy this raw image and I paste it back by Control V. And then I can do exploration on the sketch itself, but I can still keep developing on this. And I'll just copy the description, put it back here, and I can set any of the styles. I will go to maybe 70% drawing influence, and I just hammer out a few variation with each style to just have a sense of which style would fit this workflow the best. So clicking through all the styles and let's see what we have. Oh, there are some wild things, definitely. This one catches my eye. This looks really nice. Actually, I like this surface transition. That's very bold. I'm gonna go with this one. But there are some other very cool additions. This is more like a design sketch. And by the way, now you can also just check the actual image details. If you generate an image on the workbench, you can click on the image and show image details. And you will see that it's the surface sculpt palette with 70% drawing influence using render with this prompt description. And you can do the same with all of these to contrast and compare them. That was done with the general style. But okay, let's see the others. It's very interesting to just look at these. I have no idea what this is, but it looks pretty cool. Okay, I think this is the automotive interior. I have no idea what it tried to create, but it can be a nice sci-fi building inspiration. And now we got the automotive exterior, and we kind of got a nice helicopter of some sort. We just need rotors on it. This is the pastel. Okay, the more photoreal styles are gonna work pretty well here. So I can just jump in and create a 3D model out of this because this looks pretty damn cool. Yeah, it's more attractive than this original one. So I'm going to switch over here. And what I'll do is maybe I just clean it up slightly. So use Magic Eraser to clean these areas up. I like this logo placement, so I will not touch that part. But I certainly don't need this hole. Okay, now I see that this will be a rectangular pad, which is going to look interesting if I turn this into a 3D model. So I'm just gonna take this detail 3D, click on it. This was also updated previously. And until it's going to create a 3D model out of this shape, I can just go back to the original. If this happens, if the alpha channel is the only one exposed on the workbench, feel free to just go into the file by double clicking and just do an action on the canvas. I usually color pick the canvas by holding down Option or Alt and just do a brush stroke. You can also undo it. It has to just sync on the server side, so you have to do an action to update it, the image displayed on the workbench. And I'll go back here, and I also create a 3D model out of this, just to see the differences because I believe this is going to create a cylindrical abrasive pad here. In the meantime though, we can play around with reference images. I usually do that if I have a shape what I'm satisfied with. I can now also explore the textures a bit more and some sort of other design inspiration. For that, we have the references, and I'm going to upload images here, but the way how I usually upload my references is that I go outside to the workbench view, and here I just paste the images on the canvas. I usually have reference images already, so I can just visit a different workbench, copy these images. You can just Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V selected images through different workbenches. So I just paste in reference images. And if you upload any image on the workbench, now you can actually click on the image and add as reference image in the 2D Studio. And this can be maybe a more sustainable way of just storing your references. So I also add these for the rugged aesthetic. And maybe one last, which I'm going to bring in if I visit the example. So let's add that last reference image. I'm not going to reveal just yet the 3D model. This one. And as you can see, I added all of these to the reference image panel. And this is also a new panel. Now we can switch between if you want to aim for style or for the materials from the image. I would personally use the style in combination with the automotive exterior palette over here, because that can be quite inspiring in terms of the form language if you use the automotive style. And I'll just usually lower down the drawing influence and explore a bit. I can also set the strength here or even make a selection, but I usually just explore the reference images on the entire image. Just on a high level if you can get any sort of inspiring aesthetic out of these. So now it's going to be more form language related, so we can get some crazy things with lowered influence. But if I want to be more closer to my original package, I can always get back to the material setting. And if I select the same image, maybe I can keep the influence at very high. And if I generate this way, now with the material setting with the reference image, it will be a more photoreal, and it will be much more focused on the materials and colors from the image. And it will not change that much on the actual shape. Of course, you can always control that with the drawing influence slider, and you can always decide to set the reference image at a desired state as well. So we get also, we got some really cool materials as well, just for inspiration too. This translucent effect and the overall aesthetic when we just apply these images with the material setting can be very, very cool, cohesive in its aesthetic. And we can just maybe gather a few inspiration from these. But this is really like a sci-fi spaceship, like a Boba Fett spaceship. It's really like that. But I can also try different reference images. Let's say, I would also be curious to see if I just apply a very abstract reference image with lower influence, just focused on the materials, what kind of aesthetic we can get. And here the prompt can stay the same, just to provide it the added context that it's indeed a side view of a handheld power sender. Now it's going to make it in this super rugged aesthetic. That's also quite cool. Might not be the case what we're looking for, but that's also super cool. Like a rusty concept design of a spaceship. Okay, one last reference image which I will also try out is this one. And I can decide to, as you can see, the palettes are locked when I'm in the material mode. This is because it's always going to use this photorealistic workflow. But if I go to the style, now the palette is unlocked once again, and now I can explore a bit more in terms of the shape too. To get this smoother, cleaner, more product design inspired aesthetic. This can also be quite cool. So I'll take some of this as well, maybe this one. Ultimately, of course, I can just focus on certain parts. Now it's quite clean, and this render came out really nice, so I wouldn't really touch it. Maybe I would just apply some materials. So I'll go ahead and, of course, I can combine these layers together as well. So let's keep it at the original, and I select some of the parts with auto selection, which is going to detect the areas here on the canvas, and I can just basically mix and match between elements and apply new prompts, new materials For instance, if I wanna only change the color, the main color of the device, I can just select these by holding down Shift or clicking on Add to Selection, and I can just keep adding these color parts. If it's selected something that I don't want, I can also hold down Alt or Option to remove from selection. So now I have selected the color parts. If it's not perfect, feel free to combine it with other selection tools like the lasso, where you have full control, and then I can just use it to remove, actually to add these parts to this selection as well, and maybe remove that tiny part, but I don't have to be perfect here. And then if I have the selection, now I can also just validate different materials. I really like the ruggedness that is coming from this image, so I will use it as a material with slightly lowered influence. And I can also say this is like a rugged material of the power tool. And I can apply it to see what kind of materials we can get. I really like this this metal olive finish on top of it, but we can maybe display it with a very slight opacity. That's what I'm talking about. Nice. Okay. Yeah, this is the kind of texture quality which I was looking for. I like the wooden aspects of this one, but I think I choose this. It has this rugged scratched material quality, and I can always lower on the opacity if I want to have an intelligent mix of the previous layers. Of course, I can start mixing and matching between, if I just hide it now and get back to the selection. I can always use it to delete parts. For example, I can also invert the selection, and hitting on delete is going to only take these rusty parts from that very rusty aesthetic image. And I can also maybe try it on this layer. So it's so much fun to also combine the layers together to see what kind of outcome we can get. And this is also really nice. And so we have a lot of possibilities to play here. But I will just go with this one on top of the original image. Okay. Yeah. And I think we're kind of ready with that. What we can try though is if I just select this part, or maybe this entire part, I can prompt for a circular abrasive pad of the sender device. And let's see if we can make this one into a circular pad, because that would really complement the design here. And for this, I would actually use a render, because we don't want to refine on this already existing aesthetic. That could also work, by the way. I'm going to try it, but I want to re-render it with a circular base instead of this rectangular base. Okay, it seems like I was too low with the drawing influence, and it's still a side view. By the way, if you hit escape, that will always reset the canvas to the middle. Okay, that's what we need. Perfect. And I can add this to the canvas. But of course, if I want to specify other details, I can also just regenerate. It would look cool in a black and red color. So I will just regenerate according to this. Okay, yeah, this one. This one clicks. It's clean as well. We can really see the abrasive texture on this. So I think I'll add this one. And let's see how we can maybe make it a bit more of an integral part of the image. So here I would probably just need to fix some of the parts by color picking the background and painting over on these. So I just quickly do that. I can of course use Magic Eraser as well, which I might do at some places. Awesome. For example, let's see this layer. Okay, I'm going to just delete this part. Okay, something like this. We still have that red accent. But what I'll do on the original layer is that I'm not a big fan of this separation. So I'll just get rid of it by the magic eraser. Yeah, maybe this part. Nice, okay. And now we basically got our device. And what I can also do is I can also turn this into a 3D model. But now I will just go back to the original 3D model that I generated from the original layer. And let's see how it did. Okay. Okay, so it also recognized this as a rectangular abrasive pad, which is, I guess, fine. That could also work. It could capture the device. We can see the mesh format, adjust the focal length. This can also be a good one to work with. But I'm gonna wait for the 3D model from this device. Okay, let's see this 3D model. Awesome. We got some cool textures on it, and we got the circular abrasive pad. How cool. Nice. Okay. And now I can isolate the 3D model, and we can render it in different views. So maybe we can render it in a view like this. I can also set the focal length, maybe set it to 30 to make it slightly flatter. I can also duplicate the layer and display it in an alternative position. And here, now we can either refine on these images, or we can create a new rendering that will slightly change on the CMF. Let's try that. And actually, rendering on the alpha channel is going to result in a black background. So if you want to retain a light or white background, feel free to just put in a white background, but I can just render now on the black. Okay, that's cool. And of course, if I re-render, it's slightly going to change from the original concept, but it's still true to the original package. That's why this kind of exploration is better done at an early stage. But if something is displayed on the same canvas, this can be multiple sketches or multiple views of the 3D model in this case, it will try to match these together, which is very handy. So I'm just gonna do that. It's a cool rendering. Also, I'll go back here and maybe create a situational rendering, maybe with a hand is somehow grabbing onto this device just to realize it in a scene. So I'll put in maybe a desk, just a basic color block of a desk. And also a hand, and we have a hand 3D model. So I'm gonna go here and import this as an asset. And here we go. And I can then position it over this device that it's kind of grabbing onto it. One thing to mention as well is that currently there is an axis that I cannot rotate against. And to overcome that, I can just flatten out this 3D model as an image by simply Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V, and now we get an image layer. So now I can grab the Move tool and maybe rotate it a little bit like this to give it more of an angle. And now I can create a new layer, perhaps to actually maybe put a cloth garment on this model. So I just select a different color, and I'm gonna cover this part as a proper hand with a jacket, perhaps something like this. And I'm curious if I redescribe the scene, what is going to happen. Orbital center in use, held by a hand wearing a blue glove. We don't need this. Maybe let's try this on a brown surface, on a brown table or desk. Brown countertop. Okay. And we can render this way, but here I would just put in a white background below these, selecting the white color. We have a color picker under the paintbrush. You put it under everything because we don't want to have the black parts. And let's render. Let's try this prompt with high drawing influence in the photoreal style, just to have a quick situational render as well. Okay. Okay, the blue glove is interesting. Okay, why do we have that surface? Because it's... Okay, then in this case, let's hide the white background and render. Nicer. Okay, we don't need the blue glove, I decided. Let's just regenerate. I usually just click on enter instead of the generate button. We would need clothes, and I think this could be good. I think something like this can definitely work, so I'll add this to the canvas. Okay. Now maybe if this is too realistic for us and we don't necessarily want to show a different CMF on compared to the original design that we did, what I can do here is put a prompt like monochrome, let's say sketch of a handheld sender in use, and just regenerating in Vizcom general to have a sketchier style. Very soon we could also train our own visual styles and we could have a storytelling language there or storytelling style there. But this could help. I would say if I lower down here on the opacity to make it lighter, it will have a... It can help it to make it into a less refined sketch because we don't have that much contrast in the image. And that's just a quick tip when it comes to contrast. Now we can get something very light, which can just help us like roughly visualize this scene instead of the more photoreal scene that we had before. So I can just basically take these. By the way, I can just expose all the layers to the workbench by clicking on them, duplicate to workbench, and the image is duplicated over here. But if I go back, I will also duplicate this image. And I will, of course, also duplicate our original design, which was the combination of these images. I could also visualize the hand here. That could also look nice, but I've decided to do another view, which was enabled by the 3D model, so super handy. So I would consider this as a proposal, and let's just duplicate this one once again. Okay. So we got this proposal. And maybe I can use this to just name some of the main parts on the image. And this just showcases the product in use. So this one can be maybe put, bring to front. Maybe I can just put this here as the intended use of this product. Something like that. And then I can maybe go into this image, create a new layer, and just start pointing, with the brush tool, start pointing out different elements such as the ergonomic grip handle. And so we can get a nice image that also just describe the product a bit better. But so this was just a quick look on how would I create a project inside Vizcom. This is the hero rendering and some storytelling shots or intended use shots rendered in an alternative style, basically to make it separate and to overcome the fact that it's very hard to create this same object in that situation right now. But we can just have a nice overall product with the 3D models that we can also export. So if I go back to the original file, which by the way, I can just find by going under View and highlight images with multiple layers. And this will only highlight the images where I have different layers and renderings inside. And this was the original file. This way I can just find it. And if I go back to the 3D model, which was this, I can export in many different formats if I want to model on top of them in a more accurate way. We have a triangulated mesh that we need to model on top to create something which is a bit more controlled. But this can be a perfect overlay, and this can of course be wonderful as a rendering base. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions regarding the workflow, and feel free to design some cool senders in this case. I'll see you in the next video, and take care.